Right, hi everyone, Coach Oyama. I have a passion to help you and improve, and I specialize through macro. So all my coaching is free. All you got to do is DM me. Here's some experience that I've had, and my Discord down here if you want me. And let's ride into the gameplay.
Sitting in cafes all day.
Just the time here. So Mercy player, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the what we're dealing with. Ranked up from Plat 3 to Masters 4 in a little bit with more than 24 hours dueling with my friend. Alright, I'm feeling so overwhelmed by tracers and sombras diving. Any advice? A lot of advice. Oh my. Okay. Well, we're still going to go through this, and I'm going to try to give you a top-down view of like what's going on in the game. And I think Masters 3 we're at the point mechanically where you can start understanding higher level concepts and start playing around them. Getting into the fun of it. Okay, so going into this team fight here, you see that you scout that they have a Doomfist. Okay, you scout they have a Tracer here. Oh, all right. Okay, so your Kiriko totally just ignored you. Pretty sure Nicki Minaj. No, that's a different player that I'm thinking of. But there's a pretty good Mercy player named. I think it was Nicki. Needless to say. So that fight, honestly, you couldn't have done anything. The one thing that I'm going to say is don't use your GA excessively, because in this team composition, if you look at the enemy team, it's very important to do this at the beginning of every game so you know how you should be playing. They have two flankers and no one in main that's going to be spamming down main at you. It's always going to be very explosive, energetic attacks, especially from the hack. And so using your GA like this, there's really no need to, because who's going to be shooting you? Like, no one, right? And every single time you use your GA, especially since they nerfed it from 3 seconds, I think that was pretty recent, down, or from 2 seconds up to 3 seconds, whenever you don't have GA, like in these 3 seconds, boom, that uptime, look, speak of the devil, immediately punished for using your GA for nothing. And so, if you can stop using your GA and only using your GA when you, or in this specific team composition, because you know they have a Doomfist and double dive DPS, or double flanking DPS, who don't really spam you out, but more so dive you out. Yeah, then you can save your GA for when they engage on you, then you do Mercy tricks. So that means, like, you know, using your GA and then at the very end, turning, like, changing your movement input to go the other way. Or, yeah, exactly. Perfect. You use your GA to get out of the hack. And I mean, you didn't fully get out of the hack, but that's much better than not having your GA and barely getting out of the hack. One thing that I would like to mention here on the Mercy micro, though, I feel like, especially since they nerfed Mercy, you don't get as much value healing, just purely healing, versus as if you were damage boosting. For example, your Reaper uses his ultimate on card here. If instead of healing your Moira here, you were damage boosting your Reaper, you probably could have killed this Lucio. Maybe. But, you know, the difference between maybe and, like, having that opportunity and not having that opportunity is a big one. So, just off of the, I'm going to say decision making and not mechanics, because I feel like this isn't mechanics. Whatever. I like how you use your GA there. I would say be a bit more attentive. I feel like if I were to just tell you and remind you of the threats in this game, which you could definitely do yourself, I'm just saying, like if we started this game off, or if I pause this game and I told you they have a Tracer and they have a Sombra, which you can do yourself, that's the thing, I'm about to recommend you that, but if I told you that they have a Tracer and they have a Sombra, and those are your only two threats other than the Doomfist, because you're probably always passively thinking about the Doomfist one way or another, you're going to be way more attentive to using your Guardian Angel to get out of these Tracer and Sombra engages, because they're focusing you really hard, to be honest. And yeah, if you're just a bit more attentive to their engages and you only use your GA to avoid them and look back towards your support player to be able to mitigate the effects of their flanks, you would be playing a lot better. I like the damage boost here onto your Torbjorn, which is good. Healing critical targets is always good. Okay, and then damage boosting, I would say you could just solid hold your damage boost on your Moira while she's coalescing. That's actually a thing. Because it actually does a lot of damage to squishies and punishes bad positioning really well. This damage boost is good. All is good. I like your GA to get back up the high ground. I would say though, there's a lot of risky playing in the open, considering that they're very bursty. So if they all decided to focus you at the same time, that would be very detrimental to your well-being. So I think otherwise the gameplay here is actually pretty solid. Okay, so one thing that I want to say is try to focus on, because it's really hard to just directly give you the advice of just damage boost more, because there's a lot of factors including positioning and how you use your GA, in which you're more open to damage boosting. But if you can somehow get more damage boosts and heals in here, because I notice that you're focused a bit more on healing rather than damage boosting. I would rather have you like attach and kind of pocket your 1 DPS and then start thinking about, okay, so first priority is keeping your other support alive. So if your other support takes like anywhere up to like 75%, or no, like is at 75% health, just go over and like help them if you can, if it's really easy to just top them off. Okay, this ultimate, I'm going to talk about this ultimate really quick right after I explain. But if you can help your support and just top them off really quickly, that's your first priority. Your second priority is keeping your tank player alive. If they're critical, even if it's not your job and you have like a flex support like Mora that like really rapidly heal them up, not like a Briggs or Lucio, you can still heal your tank player or a critical DPS afterwards. So in order of priority, we're going to go from pocketing first, then healer, then tank player, then critical DPS. But the reason why we do this is, one, you get the most value if you enable your DPS, because they can't kill you if they're dead. And then 2, you need to be alive to kill the enemies, so that's where keeping your other support alive is. 3, you need to have space to be able to kill the enemies, that's where your tank player is, and killing your enemies last is your DPS players. Your tank player can still kill enemies, it's just it makes it much easier if your DPS players are alive, but there's nearly no way that you're killing enemies without your tank player alive, so that's why the tank player comes first. Okay, let's go over this ultimate here. I'm gonna go over, I feel like this ultimate has okay timing, but I can tell it wasn't intended to have, it doesn't have the right, it's the thought that matters. It doesn't have the right reasoning behind why you popped your ultimate. You popped your ultimate because you heard Coalescence and that there was a tracer on you, rather than, in this situation, I would say hover your ultimate. Because, boom, these factors are lining up for you to use your ultimate, but it's not quite time for you to use your ultimate yet, because you can still just pocket until you actually need your ultimate when they're at half health, rather than use your ultimate early. And it sounds like nitpicking, but it makes all the difference when they're done with their Coalescence, and then you still have that uptime of your ulting and they're not for a solid like 3 seconds, then that's where your team can really go aggressive, and you'll create a really, really big advantage, because it's like a very widespreading advantage over the enemy team that your team will be able to take advantage of. Even though it feels like it's small, your team will probably play adaptively and know that they're full health and they can push on the enemies and not be punished as hard. Or if they're punished, then you have a much better uptime or much better recovery than the enemies. Finishing my thoughts there. Yeah, your healing priority, very good here. I would say actually don't top off your Sigma and pocket your cast. Perfect. But then damage boost your cast. Remember the priorities. Yeah, your Sigma was half health and critical there. Yeah, now your cast, and then now damage boost your cast once he's topped off. Don't even look back at your team if one of your priorities doesn't line up. I would much rather see your cast kill 5 and then you lose 2 people, rather than you just trying to keep everyone topped up and no one dies on the enemy team. Okay, talking about this ultimate here. Why did you pop your ultimate? Oh, you popped it in preemptively for the Doom. Okay. Never pop it preemptively for the Doomfist. I feel like every single time that you're popping your ultimate, you could just be hovering your ultimate because these couple of seconds, because you waste like around a fifth of your GA just waiting for the Doomfist to come down, versus if you pop your GA right now while your team's backing up, needless to say, your Sigma kind of did recklessly die, but you would have a much better time holding the angles here, and maybe your team could even hold high ground. Okay, your team played it pretty poorly, I'm not gonna lie, but you know, it's all the small things and the habits that matter when it comes down to the controllable things that you can do. Okay, so very important to note that like how to play your hero when you have another support. But when you have it, your DPS is critical there. But when you have another support, when you have a support switch, it's very important to realize how differently you have to play. Because here, you don't have to pocket your Brigitte back to full health unless she's getting full dived by Tracer. Which, even if she is getting full dived by Tracer, you can pretty much heal her to half and just let her deal with that. Because that's like what Brigitte does. She's very good against the enemy Tracers and enemy threats and flankers to be able to handle it on her own and provide some AoE healing, so you don't necessarily have to top people up anymore when they're in your backline. And it's easier to heal your DPS players or your core rather than your flankers, but your tank player is not going to receive as much healing, so in your head you can start thinking your priorities. Still pocketing DPS, I'm still healing the tank, but I'm going to be healing the tank way more often. I'm not going to be saving critical DPS as often because Brigitte is going to pack them. And then I'm probably not going to be saving Brigitte very often, but only when she gets to like half health, because she's very self-sustenant. She literally has a shield for herself. Yeah, so I like how you detach from your Brigitte there, because you know that she's going to live. Again, I noticed a lot of the times that you're using GA, I feel like you're very in control. You're just not aware. So a lot of the time support players don't have the mechanics to be in control, but I feel like you're very in control of your mechanics and you know what you're doing, you're just not aware that you shouldn't be doing it. So from here on out, use your GA very decisively, and not to say that you can't just GA off a cooldown like this, but repositioning versus, or when you reposition, use it tactically. For example, I like this reposition to high ground here, even though it kind of just goes in front of the Cassidy. There is an element to soft feeding. I'm gonna call it it's like Reddit Lucioing, where you take their attention, because he's not shooting your teammates here, and he's not killing your teammates, but he's not killing you, so you're wasting his time, and it's essentially a 5v4 while you're doing that. But at the same time, these past couple of deaths where you go right in front into main, you have to like carefully manage your risk, and so like especially back before, when you know that they have a Sombra and Tracer, if you just think about the enemy team composition, like specifically the enemy DPS and then your healer, when you were bouncing around in your own backline, that was really bad because they had only dive heroes, whereas here now it's a little less bad, and it's actually somewhat beneficial if you grasp the Cassidy's attention or the May's attention and still survive. So let's go over like 3 things that we can work on. One, using your GA, how you use it against what the enemy team composition is. Or, yeah, we'll do that first, because that's like the one thing keeping you alive, and I feel like you noticed it too. So look at the enemy 2 DPS. So DPS on the enemy team. Assess your threats. That's what I'm going to call them. Usually threats are just the DPS, maybe the tank and the tank player, and then maybe one of the healers. Like if this Lucio is Reddit Lucioing, that's one of your threats, because that's what I would be doing if I was the Lucio. I would be like applying a lot of pressure onto you to try to see if you'll mess up. And then 2 would be your ultimate usage. So let's go over your ultimate. When do we want to use it? So I feel like you have a really good idea of when to use it. You align the threats. You're like taking these check marks, and then you need to wait for the final straw in the back and not preemptively ult. And I know it's going to be frustrating because sometimes you're going to wait too long, and then you're going to ult too late. You're going to be like, why did I follow this guy's advice? I should have just preemptively ulted. But it's in that small, like, it's in the small things in which you'll be able to see yourself getting a lot more value by waiting before you ult. And then number 3, let's talk about your priorities. So you're pocketing. The first is pocketing, then is your second support, then it's your tank, and then it's your DPS, critical DPS. Critical DPS. They're really bad. Really bad abbreviations. PSTDD. PSTCD. But needless to say, it'll get down to muscle memory once you get it. But pocketing should be number one. Or like your neutral. It should be your neutral. Not necessarily number one. I would say support is your number 1, 2, 3, and then like neutral. So if you can get that down, and then it'll enable your other DPS, especially since you're playing with the duo. So if you're like in a Discord call with them, even better, because then you can talk about when you're going to flank, whether or not it's a good time to flank, what the tempo of the team fight, because you're seeing more than they are, because you're farther behind and you require less mechanical attention on your hero to be able to get that value. Otherwise, I think once you implement those things, you'll see a dramatic increase in the clarity of what's going on in the team fights, and then you can start focusing on high level concepts because you're not that far from it, from ult tracking, from tempo in the fight and calling tempo, and then tracking cooldowns. So tracking cooldowns is a bit that's actually like in reverse order. The tempo should come first of the fight, and then tracking cooldowns. So this is just like what's ahead of you, just in case you were curious. Tracking cooldowns, and then ult tracking, and then fight planning. So I feel like, yeah, as soon as you're done with the mechanical mistakes, then you'll get to tempo, and then the rest will come, and life will be awesome, and you'll be in top 500 in no time.